He said my name. In the middle of the night, deep in sleep, my roommate whispered my name in the dark. I can still feel the silence after that. The kind of silence that isn't empty, but too full. Full of questions I wasn't sure I wanted to answer. Full of possibilities I was sure I was inventing. Because straight people don't do that, right? Straight people don't say their gay friend's name in their sleep. Unless… No. Stop it. But my brain wouldn't stop. And neither would my heart. My name is Lucas. I'm 24, a freelance graphic designer, and I've been sharing an apartment with Matthew for almost 8 months. 8 months sharing the same space. 8 months of breakfasts together, of shows on the couch, of random conversations about nothing and everything at the same time. 8 months pretending I felt absolutely nothing every time he accidentally touched me. Every time he smiled that specific way. Every time he said my name. But never like this. Never in the dark with that slightly hoarse, sleep-laden voice loaded with something I couldn't decipher. We met by chance. Well, technically it was on a Facebook roommate search group. I had just gotten out of a complicated relationship and urgently needed a new place. He had just moved to the city for work and was looking for someone to split the rent. It was practical, simple, nothing special. Until it was. Because Matthew wasn't just any roommate. He was the kind of person who lit up the room when he walked in. Tall, brown hair always a bit messy, an easy smile that made anyone feel welcome. He worked in sales, so he had that outgoing energy, that way of talking that made you open up without even realizing it. And I, who had always been more reserved, more to myself, suddenly found myself telling him things I didn't tell anyone. We became friends quickly. Real friends. The kind where you don't need to force conversation, where silence is comfortable, where you miss them when they're not around. And that's when I started to realize I was screwed. Because it wasn't just his eyes that captivated me when he spoke. It wasn't just the way he laughed, throwing his head back, completely unashamed. It wasn't just how he remembered small details about me, like how I don't like coffee too strong, or how I have a habit of organizing books by color. It was all of that together. It was the way he existed in the same space as me, filling places I didn't even know were empty. But I knew, deep down, that it couldn't go anywhere. Matthew was straight. He had mentioned ex-girlfriends a few times, talked about girls he found attractive, had that carefree attitude of someone who never had to question their own sexuality. And me? I was just the gay friend who shared an apartment with him. The nice guy. The confidant. Nothing more than that. So I held it in. I held in every time my heart raced when he put his hand on my shoulder. I held in every time I caught myself looking too long while he was distracted on his phone. I held in every stupid fantasy my mind created before falling asleep. Because that's what you do when you like someone who can't like you back. You hold it in. You push it down. You pretend it doesn't exist. Until one night, everything changed. It was a normal Tuesday. We had eaten dinner together, watched an episode of some series, and then each went to our rooms. Normal routine. Nothing special. It took me a while to fall asleep, because I had a project due the next day, and my mind was racing too much. But eventually exhaustion won. It must have been around 3 in the morning when I woke up. I don't really know what woke me. Maybe a noise in the street. Maybe just that strange feeling that something was different. The apartment was completely silent, plunged into that dense darkness that only exists in the early hours of the morning, when the world seems to have paused. And then, I heard it. Lucas. The voice came from the next room. Low. Whispered. But clear enough to penetrate the thin wall between our rooms. Matthew's voice. My entire body froze. For a second I thought I was dreaming. That my imagination had finally crossed the line between fantasy and hallucination. But no. I was awake. Completely awake. And I had just heard my straight roommate say my name in the middle of the night. I didn't breathe. I literally held my breath, as if any movement could break the moment or make it disappear. My heart was beating so loudly I was sure he could hear it through the wall. I waited. I don't really know for what. Maybe for something else. Maybe for an explanation that made sense. but only silence came. The same heavy silence that seemed to occupy every inch of the apartment now. I lay there, in the dark, staring at the invisible ceiling, trying to process what had just happened. Was he dreaming? Obviously he was. People talk in their sleep. It means nothing. He was probably dreaming about some random situation where I was present. Like, I don't know, us splitting the grocery bill or arguing about which pizza to order. Something absolutely trivial and without any deep meaning. But what if it wasn't? What if it meant something? Stop it, Lucas. You're delusional. You're projecting your own feelings onto a word spoken during sleep. This is pathetic. This is desperate. But my body didn't think it was any of that. My body was electrified. Every nerve lit up as if someone had flipped a switch I didn't even know existed. Because a part of me, a small, pathetic part that I tried to suffocate every day, was screaming that it did mean something. That no one says someone's name like that, with that tone, unless they feel something. I turned onto my side, clutching the pillow to my chest, trying to calm the storm that had brewed inside me. I started reviewing every recent interaction we'd had. Every look, every casual touch, every shared laugh. There was that day, 2 weeks ago, when we went to the market together. He reached for something on the top shelf, and as he brought his arm down, his hand brushed against mine. For a second, maybe two, he didn't pull away. It stayed there, fingers almost intertwined, before he pulled back as if nothing had happened. At the time, I had ignored it. I thought it was just absent-mindedness. And that night we stayed up late talking on the couch. He told me about the pressure at work, about how he felt lonely sometimes even when surrounded by people. And when I said I understood exactly what that was like, he looked at me differently. A look that lasted too long to be casual. A look that made my stomach flip. And last week, last week, we were watching a movie and he laid his head on my shoulder, said he was tired. He stayed there, breathing slow and steady, for almost half an hour. I didn't move. I couldn't. I sat petrified, trying to memorize every second of that contact, knowing it would probably never happen again. Had I missed these signs? Was there something there that I was refusing to see because I was afraid of being wrong? Or was I doing exactly what I swore I wouldn't do? Creating meaning where there was none. The rest of the night was torture. I couldn't go back to sleep. I lay there, eyes open in the dark, mind racing in endless circles of analysis and doubt. At every noise coming from his room, my body went on alert. But nothing else happened. Just silence. When the morning light started filtering through the curtains, I was exhausted. Not from physical tiredness, but from the emotional weight of carrying something I didn't know was real. Because the truth is, it didn't matter if he had said my name in his sleep. What mattered was what I was going to do with that information. I could ignore it. Move on as if nothing had happened. After all, maybe nothing really had happened. Maybe I was giving too much importance to a random moment of his subconscious. Or I could pay attention. Observe. Look for signs when he was awake. Real signs. Signs that couldn't be explained away as coincidence or my imagination. Because I needed to know. I needed to know if that voice in the dark, that whisper of my name loaded with something I couldn't name, meant that I wasn't alone in this madness. That maybe, just maybe, he felt it too. Even if the idea terrified me. Even if the possibility of being wrong could destroy the only real friendship I had built in months. Even if risking asking meant losing everything. I needed to know if that was real, or if I was just projecting my own desires onto meaningless words spoken in the dark. Because if it was real, everything would change. And I wasn't sure if I was ready for that. But I also wasn't sure if I could live without finding out. The next morning I woke up before him. Obviously. How could I sleep knowing what I had heard? I lay there in my bed, staring at the ceiling, mentally rehearsing what our first encounter after that night would be like. Would he remember? Had it been conscious, even if for a second? Or was it just my desperate brain projecting meaning onto random sounds? I heard his alarm go off. 3 rings before he turned it off. As always. I heard his footsteps in the hallway, the creak of the loose board near the bathroom, the tap turning on. Everything absolutely normal. Everything absolutely unbearable. I needed to act normal. Needed to be the casual, chill roommate who definitely hadn't spent the entire night analyzing every syllable whispered in the dark. I got up, threw on a random t-shirt, took a deep breath, and left the room. He was in the kitchen, making coffee. Back to me. Basic white t-shirt, gray sweatpants, hair still messy from sleep, completely normal, completely beautiful, completely oblivious to the fact that he had destroyed my sanity just a few hours ago. "Morning," I said, trying to sound casual. My voice came out a bit hoarse. I cleared my throat. He turned, smiled. That crooked, half-tired smile he always gave in the morning. "Morning. Sleep well?" "Sleep well." The irony almost made me laugh. Almost. So, I replied, walking to the fridge because I needed to do something with my hands. "You? Like a rock." He yawned, stretching his arms above his head. His shirt rode up a few inches. I stared at the fridge with an intensity that would probably scare the milk. Like a rock. So he didn't remember. Of course he didn't remember. People who talk in their sleep never remember. That's what happens when you're unconscious. Your brain just lets things out. Random things. Meaningless things. But what if it wasn't random? We sat at the little kitchen table with our coffee mugs. Him in his usual spot, me in mine. 12 inches apart. 12 inches that felt like miles. Or millimeters. Depending on how I looked at it. "So, what are you doing today?" he asked, scrolling on his phone. "I'm going to secretly analyze every word you say, every move you make, every look you give me, trying to decipher if you're hiding the same thing I've been hiding for months." "Work in the morning, gym in the afternoon," I said. "The usual. You?" "Meeting at 10, then I'll probably be at the office until around 6. Absolutely trivial conversation. Absolutely torturous. I studied every nuance. His tone of voice, casual. The pauses between words, normal. The eye contact, brief, but no briefer than usual. Nothing. Absolutely nothing different. Which only proved that either he didn't remember, or he was a much better actor than I was. The following days were a crash course in forensic behavioral analysis. I became a detective of micro-expressions, a scholar of body language, a PhD in, does this mean anything or am I just losing my mind? I cataloged everything. And when I say everything, I mean everything. Eye contact, average duration of 2. 3 seconds during casual conversations. 3 seconds when telling me something funny. Once, 4 whole seconds when I said something that made him genuinely laugh. Does that mean anything? Is 4 seconds a lot? Is it too little? What is the statistically normal duration of eye contact between straight friends? Is there a manual for this? Physical proximity. Consistently maintained about 18 inches of distance in normal situations. But in the cramped kitchen, when we passed each other, sometimes his shoulder would brush against mine. Lightly, casually, probably without even noticing. But I noticed. My God, how I noticed. Every accidental touch burned like proof of. Of what? Of nothing. Of everything? Voice tone. Animated when talking about work. Relaxed when we watched shows. Soft when talking to me early in the morning. But soft like what? Soft like I'm still sleepy? Or soft like I like talking to you when the world is still quiet? Is there a difference? Should there be? I was losing my mind. Officially losing my mind. But then, 3 days after that night, the first maybe happened. We were on the couch, one on each end, watching some show neither of us was really paying attention to. He had brought popcorn. He left the bowl in the middle of the couch, between us, neutral territory. I reached out to grab a handful. He reached out at the same time. Our fingers touched inside the bowl. It was half a second, maybe less, but I felt it. That ridiculous teen movie electricity you think doesn't exist in real life until it does. And the worst part, he didn't pull his hand away immediately. It stayed there for a fraction of a second extra. He looked at me and smiled. It was a small smile, almost nothing, but there was something there, something in his eyes. Amusement, embarrassment, acknowledgement that that touch had lasted half a second beyond accidental. "Sorry," he said, grabbing the popcorn. "No problem," I replied, pretending my heart wasn't trying to beat out of my chest. We spent the rest of the episode in silence, but the popcorn bowl stayed there between us, like a physical reminder of that ridiculously insignificant moment that my brain insisted on turning into something monumental. Did that mean anything? Or was I projecting? How could I know? 2 days later, the second maybe. He came home early, found me cooking. Pasta. Nothing fancy. He leaned against the counter next to the stove, watching me. "Smells good," he said. "It's just pasta with tomato sauce," I replied, stirring the pot. "Still." Pause. "You always make it look easy. Cooking, I mean." "I'd burn water." I laughed. "It's not that hard. I can teach you if you want." He considered it for a moment. "Really?" "Sure." And that was how we found ourselves side by side in our tiny kitchen, with him holding the wooden spoon like it was a dangerous weapon while I explained the difference between sautéing and frying. "Like this?" he asked, stirring the onions. "Not so fast. Slow down. Let it brown." He slowed down. We stood there in silence, watching the onion change color, our shoulders touching because the kitchen was small and we were sharing the same stove space. He didn't pull away. I didn't pull away. "You're a good teacher," he said quietly, almost casual, but there was something in his voice. Something soft. Something that made my stomach flip. "You're a good student," I replied because I needed to say something. He looked at me, not at the pot, at me. 3 seconds. 4. 5. "Thanks," he said, and smiled. That crooked smile I knew so well, but this time with something different, something warmer. Or was I imagining it? Projecting my own desires onto a completely innocent moment of teaching someone to cook. We had dinner together that night, at the little kitchen table. We talked about trivial things, work, family, plans for the weekend. But there was something in the air, a tension, or a softness, or both, or nothing, and I was officially losing my sanity. When we finished, he insisted on doing the dishes. "You cooked, I clean, only fair." I stood there, drying the plates he handed me. Our fingers touched a few times. Accidental. Totally accidental. But every touch reminded me of that night. Of that whisper. Of my name spoken in the dark as if it were something precious. The third maybe came on the weekend. He was on the couch, wearing headphones, listening to music. I walked by, heading to my room, and he pulled one ear cup off. "Hey, wanna listen? I discovered a new band. Think you'll like it." I sat down next to him, closer than I normally would, because he held out the left earbud to me and the cord wasn't that long. Our shoulders pressed together, our thighs almost touching. The music started. It was good. Some melancholic indie rock that suited him. I closed my eyes, letting myself get absorbed by the melody. "Like it?" he asked after 2 songs. I opened my eyes. He was looking at me, again. That look that lasted half a second longer than it should. That look that made my heart forget how to function. "I did," I said. "You have good taste." "So do you." It was a weird response, because we were talking about music, right? Just music. But the way he said it, looking at me like that, with that half smile on his lips, it felt like we were talking about something else. We stayed like that for 3 more songs, sharing headphones like teenagers. So close I could feel his heat. So close that if I leaned in just a few inches, our faces would touch. I didn't lean in. He didn't lean in. But the possibility was there, hanging in the air between us like smoke. When the playlist ended, he put his phone away. "Thanks for listening with me. Thanks for sharing." Polite words, civilized, completely inadequate to describe what had just happened, or what I thought had happened, or what absolutely hadn't happened beyond my overactive imagination. That night, lying in bed, I did what I'd done every night since that whisper. I analyzed everything. The accidental touches, 3 in 1 week. Normal rate? Above normal? How could I compare? The lingering glances, at least 5 moments where he looked at me long enough to make my brain short-circuit. Does it mean something? Or is he just someone who maintains eye contact? The moments of physical proximity, popcorn bowl, kitchen, headphones. All with perfectly reasonable explanations. All with perfectly insane possibilities. And the words, "You're a good teacher. You have good taste. Thanks for listening with me." Normal phrases. Phrases friends say to friends. Phrases that maybe, possibly, in an alternate universe where I wasn't completely losing my mind, could mean something more. Have you ever tried to read someone's signals? Like, really read them? It's torture. Because every gesture can mean everything or nothing. Every word can be loaded with intent or completely empty. And you never know. You just don't know. Unless you ask. Unless you take a risk. Unless you put it all on the line and say, "Hey, you said my name in your sleep, and now I can't stop thinking about you, and I need to know if this means what I think it means, or if I'm living in a pathetic fantasy of my own making." But how do you do that? How do you ask without destroying everything? Because if I was wrong, if this was all just normal cohabitation moments that my anxious mind had twisted into evidence of something bigger, I'd lose not just the hope, but the friendship too. The shared apartment, the ease of waking up and knowing he'd be there, making coffee, smiling that crooked smile, just being him. And if I was right? If those looks meant something? If those touches weren't accidental? If he was also feeling this tension, this electricity, this unnameable thing hovering between us like an unasked question? So I needed to know. I needed to be sure, because living in this uncertainty was killing me slowly, one maybe at a time. I decided that night, staring at the dark ceiling, listening to his breathing in the next room. Passive observation wasn't enough. Cataloging micro-expressions and counting seconds of eye contact wouldn't give me answers. I needed more concrete data. I needed to create situations, test hypotheses, provoke reactions. I needed to know if what I saw in his eyes was real, or if it was just the reflection of my own desperate desires. Because here's the truth. When you want something badly, really badly, you start seeing signs in everything. The whole universe becomes a coded message waiting to be decoded. And you can't trust your own judgment because your judgment is completely compromised by what you hope is true. So you need more than observation. You need action. I couldn't stand this uncertainty anymore. I couldn't stand lying awake at night anymore, replaying every interaction, every look, every accidental touch, trying to assemble a puzzle that might not even have enough pieces to form a complete picture. I needed to know once and for all, even if the answer destroyed me, even if I found out I was projecting everything, even if I lost the comfortable fantasy of maybe and had to face the brutal reality of no. Because living in maybe is a special kind of torture. It's hope mixed with fear. It's wanting to believe but being terrified of being wrong. It's every moment being simultaneously the best and the worst thing that's ever happened to you. And I needed an answer. Any answer. Even the worst one. Because at least then I'd know. At least then I could stop counting seconds of eye contact and start living again. I turned on my side, staring at the wall separating our rooms. On the other side, he was sleeping. Maybe dreaming. Maybe whispering things in the dark he'd never say awake. Tomorrow, I thought. Tomorrow I start looking for real answers. I didn't know how. I didn't know exactly what I would do. But I knew I couldn't go on like this. I needed to know if that was real, or if I was projecting my own desires onto meaningless words. And one way or another, I would find out. I couldn't live just watching anymore. Every look I analyzed, every accidental touch I cataloged in my mind, every silence I tried to decipher. It was eating me up inside. The uncertainty was like a weight I carried all day, an anxiety that never let me completely relax. I needed answers. But how do you get answers without asking the questions I was so afraid to voice? That's when I started creating situations. Not obviously, not like a trap, but small moments that could give me clues about what he really felt. Moments that would seem natural, spontaneous, but that I planned carefully as if I were assembling an emotional puzzle. Guilt came along with every plan. Was I manipulating the situation? Was I being dishonest by creating these scenarios just to test his reactions? Part of me knew I was. But the other part, the part desperate for clarity, argued that I was just creating opportunities for the truth to emerge naturally, whatever that truth might be. The first situation I created was a movie night. Sounds simple, right? But I chose the movie with a very specific purpose. An LGBTQ+ drama that had won several awards, with an emotionally deep story about two men falling in love under difficult circumstances. It wasn't too explicit, but it was impossible to ignore the themes. "Hey, I found this movie that looks amazing," I said on a Friday night, trying to sound casual while my heart raced. "Want to watch it? They say it's one of the best of the year." He looked at the synopsis on the phone I showed him. There was a pause that lasted only 3 seconds, but to me felt like an eternity. I could hear my own pulse in my ears. "Sounds good," he finally replied, with a smile I couldn't quite read. "Let's watch it." We set everything up like we always did for our movie nights. Popcorn, soda, lights out, both of us on the couch with that respectful distance we usually kept. But this time, I was hyper-aware of every inch between us. The movie started, and I could barely focus on the screen. My eyes kept drifting to him, watching his reactions. In the most emotional scenes, when the protagonists dealt with the fear of coming out, with family rejection, with the internal conflict between what they felt and what they thought they should feel. I saw something on his face. It wasn't discomfort. It was connection. As if those words on the screen were echoing something inside him. When the movie's most intense scene came, where one of the characters finally declares his feelings knowing he might lose everything, I felt him shift beside me, not to pull away. He leaned forward, completely engrossed in what was happening on screen. When the credits started rolling, neither of us moved immediately. The silence was charged with something I couldn't name. I knew if I let that moment pass without saying anything, I would have lost an opportunity. "What did you think?" I asked, my voice coming out lower than I intended. He stayed silent for a moment, eyes still fixed on the dark screen. When he finally spoke, his voice had a different quality. Softer. More vulnerable. "It was intense," he said. The way that character fought against his feelings for so long. Like accepting himself was the most terrifying thing he could do. He paused, and I held my breath. "I get that. I understand that fear of being who you really are." My heart raced. What did this mean? Was he talking about himself, or just sympathizing with the story? I wanted to ask more, dig deeper, but I was afraid of breaking that fragile moment of honesty. "I think we all have parts of ourselves that we're afraid to show," I said carefully, testing the waters. He looked at me then, and his eyes held something different. An openness I hadn't seen before. "Yeah, I guess so." We stayed like that for a few more seconds, in that space between spoken and unspoken words. Then he stood up, stretched, and the moment dissipated like smoke. "I'm going to bed. Thanks for picking a movie that makes you think, instead of those mindless explosions you usually like," he said with a smile, returning to our normal banter. But as I sat there, listening to his bedroom door close, my mind was racing. He had connected with that story. He had shared something vulnerable, even if indirectly. Was this a clue? Or was I just seeing what I wanted to see? Test number 1 had given me something. Not a clear answer, but a small window cracked open, and that was enough to make me want to create a second situation. A week later, it was one of those nights where neither of us could sleep. I was in the living room, trying to read but rereading the same page over and over without absorbing anything, when he showed up. "Can't sleep either?" he asked, throwing himself onto the couch next to me. "Too much on my mind," I answered honestly. "I know the feeling." We sat in silence for a moment, and then I made a decision. If I wanted to create a moment of shared vulnerability, I needed to start by being vulnerable first. I needed to give something real to get something real back. "Can I tell you something?" I asked, my stomach clenching nervously. "Of course. Always." I took a deep breath. I wasn't going to tell him about my feelings for him, not yet. But I could share another truth. Something else I carried with me. "Sometimes I feel like I'm living on autopilot," I began, choosing each word carefully. "Like I'm just following a script someone else wrote for me. You know? Doing what's expected, being who people think I should be, but without really feeling present in my own life." I could feel him looking at me, his attention completely focused on me. "I'm afraid," I continued, "of reaching 40, 50 years old, and looking back to realize I never truly lived. That I always let fear decide for me." My voice faltered a little at the end, and I realized I was being more honest than I intended. But maybe that's what the moment needed. Real, uncalculated honesty. He was silent for a time that seemed to stretch on. Then he spoke, and his voice was laden with an emotion I rarely heard. "I know exactly what you mean." He paused, and I could see he was deciding how much to share. I feel that too. Especially when I think about expectations. The expectations of my family, my friends, society. It's like there's this version of me that everyone expects, and the person I truly am gets locked away deep inside. My breath caught in my chest. Was he talking about sexuality, about identity, or about something completely different? "I'm afraid," he continued barely above a whisper, "of letting down the people I love. That if they really saw me, the real me, the hidden part, they'd just walk away." Without thinking, my hand moved and rested on his shoulder. The touch was spontaneous, driven by a genuine impulse to comfort. I expected him to pull away, for the moment to break, but he didn't pull away. Instead, he placed his own hand over mine, squeezing gently. The gesture lasted just a few seconds, but it felt like it left a mark on my skin. "The right people won't pull away," I said. And as I spoke, I realized I was talking as much to him as to myself. The people who truly matter will love you for who you are, not for who they want you to be. He looked at me then, and there were tears forming in the corners of his eyes. Tears he blinked away quickly, along with that moment of raw vulnerability. "Thank you," he said simply, "for understanding." "Always," I replied. We stayed up another hour, the conversation drifting to lighter topics, but that exchange had created something between us. A new intimacy, a deeper trust. When we finally said goodnight and each went to our rooms, I knew something had changed. Test number 2 had shown me that he also carried secrets. He also struggled against expectations and fears. This brought us closer in a way that simple observation never could have. But it still didn't answer my fundamental question. Did he feel what I felt? The third situation happened almost by accident, although I admit I created the conditions for it to be possible. It was Sunday afternoon, and I suggested we cook together. Something more elaborate than usual, a recipe that required coordination and teamwork. In the kitchen, spaces are naturally small. You have to pass each other, reach for ingredients in the same cupboards, share the same sink, the same cutting board. Physical proximity. That's what I was creating, even if I tried to convince myself it was just a pleasant Sunday afternoon. "Do you chop the vegetables while I prepare the sauce?" he suggested, already grabbing the pans. We worked side by side, and the kitchen filled with good smells and an energy that was both comfortable and electrically charged. Every time he came close to grab something, every time our arms accidentally touched, I felt an electric current run through my body. "Watch the hot pan," he warned, his hand briefly touching my waist to guide me out of the way. It was just a moment, just an innocent gesture, but it sent heat through my whole body. "Thank you," I murmured, hyper-aware of where his fingers had been. The afternoon progressed in this choreographed dance of proximity and distance, of accidental touches that perhaps weren't so accidental. I tested the limits, got a little closer than necessary, let my hand brush against his when I grabbed a spoon. And he didn't pull away. Never pulled away. At one point, We were both leaning over the same pot, checking the rice, our shoulders touching, our faces inches apart. I could feel his warmth, not just from the stove, but from his body so close to mine. I turned to make some comment about the rice, and that's when reality hit me. We were inches apart. Our eyes met, and everything else disappeared. He didn't pull away, he didn't look away. On the contrary, there was something in his eyes that I had never seen so clearly before. An intensity, an unspoken question. My breath hitched. I could feel the moment stretching, loaded with possibilities. My hand was on the edge of the stove, and his slowly rose, landing beside mine. Not touching, but so close I could feel the warmth of his skin. We stayed locked in that impossible moment, where one move could change everything. My heart was thundering. I was certain he could hear it. My eyes dipped to his lips for just a second, and when I looked back up, I caught him doing the same. The oven timer went off, breaking the spell. We both stepped back at the same time, laughing awkwardly, diving back into cooking like that moment never happened. But it did. We both felt it. Dinner was amazing, but I could barely taste it. My mind was back in that kitchen, replaying everything. The look in his eyes, the fact that he didn't step back, how we both let ourselves get that close. As we washed dishes side by side later, in a silence that was both comfortable and heavy with unresolved tension, I realized something important. These tests, these situations I had created, they had given me clues, moments of connection, of shared vulnerability, of unresolved tension. But they hadn't given me the definitive answer I was looking for. And more importantly, I realized they never could. Because in the end, I was trying to decipher his truth through ambiguous signs and carefully orchestrated moments. I was trying to read between the lines instead of simply asking directly. And that wasn't fair to him or to me. Every moment was bringing me closer to the truth, yes, but also closer to a point where I could no longer live in this uncertainty. A point where I would have to choose between continuing to hide what I felt, analyzing every gesture and every word in search of hidden meanings, or having the courage to be truly honest, to put my feelings into words, to risk our friendship, our coexistence, everything we had built together, to give him the chance to respond with his own truth, whatever it might be. That night, lying in my bed, staring at the ceiling as I listened to the familiar sounds of him moving in the next room, I knew I had reached a decision point. The tests had shown me there was something there, some connection that went beyond simple friendship. But only honest words could reveal what that something truly was. Every moment was bringing me closer to the truth, but also to the possibility of destroying everything. And soon, very soon, I would have to decide if I was ready to take that risk. Because living in uncertainty was consuming me, and I realized I'd rather face a painful truth than continue living in this limbo of hope and fear, of ambiguous signs and almost perfect moments that never fully materialized. The question now was no longer whether he felt something. The question was whether I had enough courage to find out. Every moment was bringing me closer to the truth, but also to the possibility of destroying everything. I knew it. I felt it burning in my chest every time I looked at him and saw those eyes that knew every part of me, except the most important one. But I couldn't live like this anymore. Not after everything that had happened. Not after feeling his hand in mine, seeing the way he looked at me when he thought I wasn't paying attention, realizing that maybe, just maybe, he was fighting the same silent war I was waging inside myself. I had to know. And more importantly, I had to tell the truth. So that night, after he had gone to sleep, I was alone in the living room with my own reflection on the black TV screen. I tried rehearsing the words 1,000 times. I need to tell you something. No. Too vague. About what you said in your sleep. No. Too direct. I feel something for you. God, no. That sounded like a schoolgirl confession. How do you confess something that could change everything? How do you put into words a feeling that has lived hidden for so long that it no longer feels like your own? I picked up my phone, typed and deleted 10 different messages. We need to talk. Deleted. Do you remember what you said in your sleep? Deleted. I feel it too. Deleted, because no words seemed enough to carry the weight of what I needed to say. Then I thought of all the little things. The way he always waited for me to wake up before making coffee, because he knew I liked to do it together. The playlist he created on Spotify with only songs I had hummed absent-mindedly. The note he left on the fridge last week. I bought that yogurt you like. Don't tell anyone I'm nice. They were details, crumbs. But when you're starving, crumbs feel like a feast. And maybe that's what I was doing. Feeding on small gestures because I was afraid to ask for what I really wanted. But what if he was doing the same? What if those moments weren't accidental, but the only way he could tell me the truth without risking losing what we had? I went to my room. My bed was on the other side of his wall. Sometimes, when the night was very quiet, I could hear his breathing calm until he fell asleep. It felt too intimate and too distant at the same time. I lay down, closed my eyes, tried to sleep. But my brain wouldn't stop. It kept replaying every possible scenario. He says it was just a meaningless dream. He pulls away. He laughs and pretends it's a joke. He looks at me with pity. He asks me to move out. And this was the possibility that terrified me more than any other. He says he feels the same way, and I have to learn to live in a world where this is real, and not just a secret wish I've guarded like a sacred relic. Because wishing for something impossible is safe. You can spend your whole life wishing without ever having to face the responsibility of having. But having means you can lose. I was just drifting off to sleep when I heard it. His voice, coming from the next room. It wasn't loud, but the wall was thin, and my entire body was already tuned to pick up any sound coming from him. At first, I thought I was imagining it, but then I heard it again. My name. Only this time, it wasn't just my name. I wanted to tell you. My heart stopped. I lay completely still, holding my breath, as if any movement might break the spell and make it disappear. Please, don't go. His voice was heavy with emotion. It wasn't the voice he used during the day, that controlled, casual one, always with a touch of humor to lighten the mood. It was a raw voice, vulnerable, true, and then, in a whisper so quiet I had to strain every cell in my body to hear it. I need you. I felt tears burning in my eyes. Because it wasn't a coincidence. It couldn't be. Twice. My name. Incomplete confessions. Desperate pleas. He was dreaming about me. And in dreams, where there are no masks or fear of judgment, he was telling me what he couldn't say while awake. I got up. I walked to the window. The city outside was quiet, just a few lights blinking in the distance. I leaned my forehead against the cold glass and let that truth seep into every part of me. He feels the same way. It wasn't projection. It wasn't desire disguised as reality. It was real. And now I had to be brave enough to do something about it. The next day, everything felt different. Not because anything had changed externally. The routine was the same. The apartment was the same. He was the same. But I wasn't. Because now I knew. And knowing changed everything. When he walked into the kitchen that morning, hair messy and eyes still half closed, I felt my stomach tighten. He smiled. That automatic good morning smile that meant nothing, and at the same time meant everything. Coffee? He asked, reaching for the mugs. I need to tell you something today, I said. The words slipped out before I could stop them. He paused. He looked at me. There was something in his eyes, fear, hope, that made my chest tighten. Is everything okay? He asked, and the concern in his voice was genuine. Yeah, I said. But we need to talk. Tonight. After dinner. He swallowed hard, nodded. Okay. The whole day was torture. Every minute dragged on as if time had decided to punish me for having courage. I went to work, but I couldn't focus on anything. My boss asked if I was okay 3 times. I lied 3 times. When I got home, he was already there. He had made dinner. Pasta, my favorite. The table was set. There was even a candle in the center, I thought. I don't know, since we were going to talk, it might be nice to have a proper dinner, he said, looking a bit sheepish. We sat down. We ate. We talked about trivial things. His job, mine, the neighbor downstairs complaining about the noise again. But there was a tension underneath it all. Like we both knew something big was coming and were trying to delay the inevitable. When we finished eating, we just sat there. The silence grew until it filled the entire space. And then I took a deep breath. "I need to tell you something," I started. He waited, watching my face. About what you said in your sleep." I saw the color drain from his face. I talk in my sleep?" He tried to laugh it off, but his voice cracked. "You do," I said gently. "And you said my name. Not just once. It's happened twice now." He closed his eyes, as if he wanted to disappear. I don't remember," he whispered. "I know," I said. "But I remember. And I need to ask you something." He opened his eyes, looked at me, and in that look I saw everything. The fear, the hope, the same war I'd been fighting alone, thinking I was the only one. "What did you want to tell me?" I asked softly. "In the dream you said I wanted to tell you. What was it?" Tears started to form in his eyes. I can't." "You can," I said. "You can tell me anything. You always can." He shook his head, tears streaming down his face. "You don't get it. If I say it out loud, everything changes. I can't lose you. You're everything to me. And if I tell you and you don't feel the same, I don't know how I could—" "I feel the same," I interrupted. He stopped. He looked at me as if he wasn't sure he'd heard right. "What?" "I feel the same," I said again, my voice trembling, my hands shaking, my whole body rattling with nerves, but I pushed through. "Whatever you were trying to say in that dream, I feel it too. I have for so long, and I thought I was the only one. I thought I was carrying this alone. But then you said my name in your sleep, and you said you needed me. And I realized, maybe I'm not alone in this." The silence that followed was the longest of my life. He looked at me. I looked back. Then he broke down completely. Not quiet, tears-full, body-shaking sobs. "I thought it would kill me keeping this secret," he said through his tears. "I thought I'd never be able to say it. How do you tell your best friend that you love him? How do you risk losing the one person who makes everything make sense?" "You tell the truth," I replied, feeling my own tears starting. "You take the risk, because living a lie is worse than the risk of losing." He wiped his face with his hand, took a deep breath. "How long?" he asked. "Forever," I said. "Or at least it feels like it." "And you?" "Since you moved in," he confessed. "You hauled in all those insanely heavy boxes and wouldn't let me help, and I was like, this guy's crazy. And then you smiled, and I thought, I'm done for." I laughed. He laughed too. And suddenly we were laughing and crying at the same time, and I don't know if it was relief or fear or happiness or everything all at once. "So what now?" he asked, his voice still shaky. Now we stop pretending," I said. He looked at me. Really looked at me. Like he was seeing me for the first time. "Can I kiss you?" he whispered. And for the first time in this whole story, I wasn't afraid of the answer. "Yes." He leaned in. I leaned in. And when our lips touched, it was like all the disconnected pieces of my life finally clicked into place. It wasn't like a movie kiss. It was tentative, nervous, salty with tears. But it was real. It was ours. When we pulled apart, he rested his forehead against mine. "I was so scared," he whispered. "Me too." "What if I had lost you because I was afraid to tell the truth?" "You didn't lose me," I said. "I'm here. I always have been." He took my hand, interlaced our fingers, and there, at the kitchen table with the half-eaten pasta plates and the melting candle, we didn't need any more words. Because finally, we weren't alone anymore. The things we'd whispered to ourselves in the dark had finally come into the light, and instead of tearing us apart, they freed us. But as we sat there, holding on to each other like we'd disappear if we let go. A part of me knew this was just the beginning. Because confessing was one thing. Living with that truth in a world that doesn't always accept it? That was a whole other story, and it was just beginning. The silence that settled between us wasn't uncomfortable. It was different. Heavy, yes, but in a way that felt like it carried something precious, as if we were holding something fragile that any sudden movement could break. I looked at him. He looked at me. And for the first time in months, maybe years, there was nothing hidden between us. So, I started, then stopped. Because honestly, what do you say after finally confessing the truth you spent so long hiding? He laughed. It was a nervous laugh, but genuine. And suddenly I was laughing too, and we were both sitting there in the living room, laughing like two idiots who just did something completely insane. "What do we do now?" he asked, when the laughter finally died down. And that was the question, wasn't it? Because confessing feelings is one thing. Deciding what to do with them is something else entirely. "I don't know," I admitted. "I never got this far in the scenario in my head." "You rehearsed this?" he asked with a small smile on his lips. "Like 1,000 times," I confessed. "And in none of them did you react like this." "How did I react? Sometimes you laughed in my face. Sometimes you left the apartment immediately. One time you told me we needed to find another place to live because things had gotten too weird." He shook his head slowly. "I rehearsed it too," he admitted, lying awake at night, thinking about what it would be like to tell you the truth. Most of my scenarios didn't end like this either. "How long?" I asked. The question that had tormented me for weeks. "How long have you known? Felt something for you?" he finished, took a deep breath. "I think since forever, in a way. But admitting it to myself? That took time. Months. Maybe the whole year we've lived together." A year. He had felt this for a whole year. "Me too," I murmured. "Since we met, I think. But it took me months to even name what it was, because naming it would make it real, and real meant having to deal with it." "And you were just as afraid as I was," he said. It wasn't a question. "Terrified," I confirmed, "of losing you, of ruining our friendship, of you looking at me differently after knowing." "I had the same fear," he said softly. "You are my best friend. The idea of losing that because I couldn't control my own feelings was unbearable." We sat there, letting that truth hang between us, both terrified of the same thing, both hiding for fear of losing exactly what we wanted to protect. And then slowly, I felt something touch my hand. I looked down. His fingers were on mine, hesitant, questioning. My heart was beating so hard, I was sure he could hear it. I turned my hand, letting my palm touch his. Our fingers interlaced. It was the simplest thing in the world. Holding hands, something people do without thinking. But for us, in that moment, it was everything. "Is this okay?" he asked, his voice low. "Yes," I replied. And then, because honesty was all we had now, "Better than okay. It's perfect." He squeezed my hand a little tighter, and we sat there, two guys on the couch of a messy apartment, holding hands as if that was the only solid thing in a world that had just changed completely. But even in that moment, perhaps especially in that moment, I felt something else beyond joy, a small but undeniable shadow. "My family," I said suddenly. The words came out before I could stop them. He looked at me, waiting. "If they know. If I tell them about us." I stopped, swallowing hard. "My dad. He has very specific ideas about how life should be, about who I should be." "He doesn't know?" he asked calmly. I shook my head. "I've never told anyone in my family. I was always too afraid of what would happen if I did, of what they'd say, of how they'd look at me." He didn't say anything for a moment, just kept holding my hand. "My mom knows," he said finally. "I told her 2 years ago. It was complicated. She cried, said she needed time to process. We barely spoke for weeks. And now? I asked. Now she's better. Not perfect. She still makes comments sometimes, asks when I'm going to find a nice girl, as if I'd never said anything. But she's trying. I guess that's all I can ask for. But there was something in his voice, a residual pain that even time hadn't completely healed. My college friends, I continued, they don't know either, and my coworkers. I always let them assume things. I never corrected anyone when they made jokes or comments about girls. It was easier to let it slide. You hid, he said. No judgment, just a fact. We both hid, I corrected. From our families, from our friends, from each other. He nodded slowly. And now that we're not hiding anymore. At least not from each other. What do we do about everything else? It was the question neither of us wanted to ask. Because confessing feelings in private, in the safety of our apartment, was one thing. Living those feelings in the real world, where families ask questions and friends have opinions and strangers stare, was completely different. I don't know if I'm ready, I admitted. The honesty hurt, but it felt important. To tell everyone. To make this public. Me neither, he said. And then, but I also don't know if I can go back to hiding. Not now. Not after finally being honest. And there was the dilemma. The impossible choice neither of us wanted to make. That's when my phone rang. I looked at the screen. My mom. My heart sank. Like the universe was testing exactly what we were talking about. It's my mom, I told him. Do you need to answer? He asked. I stared at the phone ringing. I thought about all those conversations with her over the years. All the times she'd asked if I was seeing anyone. All the times I dodged or made excuses or changed the subject. Yeah, I answered. But he understood without me having to finish. He let go of my hand, and that simple action letting go of my hand so I could take a call seemed to carry the full weight of what we were facing. I answered the phone. Hi, Mom. Son. Finally. I've been trying to call for days. Are you okay? I'm fine, I replied automatically. Just busy with work. You're always working. You need to actually live too, you know? She said with that half-joking, half-serious tone moms are so good at. Oh, and the neighbor's daughter is visiting. Remember Sarah? I thought maybe you two could. Mom, I interrupted. My heart was beating fast again, different from before. It wasn't excitement. It was pure fear. She paused. What is it? I looked at him. He was sitting right there, just inches away, but suddenly he seemed much further. Nothing, I said. It's just, I'm not interested in meeting Sarah, but I appreciate you trying. There was a pause on the other end. Okay, honey, I just want you to be happy, to find someone. I know, Mom, I know. We talked a bit longer, about family, work, the usual safe topics. I never brought him up, never mentioned what had just happened, never said a word about the truth I'd finally admitted. When I hung up, he was looking at me with an expression I couldn't quite decipher. Sorry, I said. Why? For not saying anything. He shook his head. I didn't expect you to say anything. A surprise call from your mom isn't exactly the ideal moment to come out of the closet. But still, I insisted. She was trying to set me up with someone, and I just let it slide. Again. You said you weren't interested, he pointed out. Yeah, but I didn't say why. I didn't tell her there's already someone who's sitting right here. We sat there in the heavy silence of that admission. That's our challenge now, isn't it? He finally said, figuring out how to exist in this space between being honest with each other and being honest with the world. Do you think we can do that? I asked. Exist in this middle ground? He thought for a long moment. I think it depends on what we want. If this between us is real, then eventually we're going to have to choose. We can't stay hidden forever. And what if I'm not ready? The question came out small, vulnerable. Then we wait, he said simply. But I also can't promise I can hide it forever. Because now that I've finally admitted it, to myself, to you, the idea of pretending again seems impossible. And there it was, the raw truth between us. He was ready to be authentic. I was still too terrified. "I don't want you to hide," I said quickly. "Not because of me. If you want to tell people, you should." "That's not how it works," he gently interrupted. "If we're in this together, and I want to be in this together, then it's a decision we make together. I can't just come out about us while you're still in hiding. That wouldn't be fair to either of us." "So what do we do?" I asked, for the second time that night. He took my hand again, this time firmer, more certain. "I think we do this at our own pace," he said. "We don't need to tell the whole world tomorrow. But we also can't hide from each other ever again. Here, in this apartment, we are honest. Completely honest. And when we're ready, both ready, we start expanding that circle of honesty." "One step at a time," I murmured. "Exactly. One step at a time." It made sense. It was rational. It was a plan. But even so, I felt the weight of what wasn't being said. The question that hung over us like a shadow. How long can we live divided like this before it breaks us? "Hey," he said, squeezing my hand. "Where did you go just now?" "Just thinking," I admitted. "About how this will work. About all the challenges we're going to face." "We'll face them together," he said. And there was such certainty in his voice that for a moment I almost believed it would be that simple. "Together," I repeated. And then, because words suddenly didn't seem enough, I leaned in, slowly, giving him time to pull back if he wanted. He didn't pull back. Our lips touched, soft, hesitant, perfect. It was my first kiss with another man. It was his first kiss with someone who truly mattered. When we separated, we were both breathing a little faster. "It was worth the wait," he murmured. I laughed. "Is it worth fighting for?" "Absolutely," he said, without hesitation. And in that moment, sitting there with him, still holding his hand, I allowed myself to believe. To believe that maybe, just maybe, authenticity was worth all the challenges we would face. But even as that thought formed, a small part of me, the part that had spent years hiding, years being afraid, whispered doubts. His family might accept it eventually. Mine will disown me. His friends might understand. Mine will judge me. "You are ready to be authentic. I am still learning not to be afraid." "What's wrong?" he asked, noticing something in my expression. "Nothing," I lied. And then, because I had promised honesty, "Everything. I'm happy. I'm terrified. I'm relieved. I'm scared of what comes next." "All at once," he said, understanding. "All at once," I confirmed. He pulled me closer, and I let my head rest on his shoulder. We stayed like that for a while. I don't know exactly how long. It could have been minutes. It could have been hours. "We knew that choosing authenticity meant choosing challenges," he said softly. "But for the first time, we're not alone in this." And he was right. For the first time, I wasn't alone. But even so, when I closed my eyes there in the dark, with him holding me, I couldn't help but wonder. When the world finds out, when my family knows, when my friends ask, when we can no longer hide, will this connection we've built be strong enough to survive? I wanted to believe it would. But believing and knowing are very different things. And as the night wore on, I held him a little tighter, as if I could somehow protect what we had built from everything that was yet to come. The decision was made. We could no longer live in that gray area, where our feelings existed only within the four walls of our apartment, hidden from the world, as if they were something shameful. I looked at him, sitting beside me on the sofa, our fingers intertwined, and felt a mix of fear and determination that I had never experienced before. "My mom called yesterday," I said, breaking the silence that had hung between us since we decided to stop hiding. "She asked when I'm going to visit them again. Said it's been months since I've been home." He squeezed my hand. "And you? Do you want to go?" "I do," I replied, feeling my heart race. But this time I won't go alone, and I won't pretend we're just roommates. I saw fear pass through his eyes, the same fear I felt. But there was something else there, a kind of shared courage, as if one's strength could sustain the other when certainty was lacking. "Are you sure?" he asked, his voice lower. "Your parents. You always said they're traditional, religious, that they expected you to—" "They expected me to be someone I never was," I interrupted. "I spent 24 years trying to be that person, hiding who I am. And you know what happened. I was miserable, until that night you said my name in your sleep and changed everything." He let out a nervous laugh. "I still can't believe that's how it started. My own subconscious threw me under the bus." "Your subconscious just couldn't keep the secret anymore," I said, turning to really face him. "Even while sleeping, the truth was so strong inside you that it needed to get out. It's like, even unconscious, you couldn't lie about how you felt anymore." He cupped my face with both hands, that gesture that had become so familiar over the last few weeks. "Then let's do this. Let's tell your family, together." The drive to my parents' house was silent. I drove with sweaty palms on the steering wheel, my stomach in knots, while he held my leg, a simple gesture of support that meant everything. With every mile, my brain concocted 1,000 different scenarios. My mom crying, my dad kicking me out, my brothers looking at me like I was a stranger. "Breathe," he whispered when we pulled up in front of the house. "No matter what happens in there, we have each other. That doesn't change." I wanted to believe that. I wanted to believe that the love we shared was enough to weather any storm. But when I knocked on the door and saw my mom open it with that hopeful smile, as if she still believed I'd show up with a girlfriend any day now, my heart almost gave out. "Son," she hugged me tight. "I missed you so much. And you brought your roommate." "Mom," I started, my voice trembling. "He's not just my roommate. That's the reason I came today. I need to tell you something. I need to tell all of you." The dining room had never felt so small. My dad sitting at the head of the table, my 2 brothers on one side, my mom on the other, and the 2 of us holding hands, about to blow up that family dynamic that had existed for so long. "I'm gay." The words came out firmer than I expected. I always have been. And this person right here next to me, he isn't my roommate. He's my boyfriend. I love him. And I chose my happiness. The silence that followed was deafening. My mom covered her mouth with her hand. My dad stayed motionless, wearing that expression I couldn't decipher. One of my brothers looked down, avoiding eye contact. The other stared at me with shock written all over his face. Anger, disappointment, maybe both. "How could you do this?" My mom's voice cracked. "After everything we taught you. After raising you with our values. And now you come here and tell us you chose this?" "It's not a choice, Mom," I replied, feeling him squeeze my hand tighter. "The only path I chose was to stop lying, to stop pretending to be someone I'm not." My dad finally spoke, his deep voice echoing through the room. "You are bringing shame to this family, bringing sin into this house." The words hit me like punches. I knew this reaction was possible. I had mentally prepared myself for it. But actually hearing it, seeing the disappointment stamped on the faces of the people I loved, it was a kind of pain no mental rehearsal could prepare you for. "So that's it?" I asked, my voice failing. "You'd prefer I lie? That I go back to pretending? That I be unhappy for the rest of my life just to keep up appearances?" "We want you to do what's right," my mom said, tears streaming down her face. "That you come back to God. That you abandon this confusion, and become the son we raised you to be." "I've always been your real son," I replied, feeling my own tears threatening to fall. "What changed is that now you know who I really am." I stood up from the chair, pulling him with me. "I came here because I love you all, because I wanted to share my happiness with you. But I'm not going to hide who I am anymore. I'm not going to apologize for existing anymore." We left that house with the weight of rejection on our shoulders, but also with something I had never felt before, the lightness of not carrying secrets anymore. In the car, I broke down. I cried in a way I hadn't cried since I was a child, all that pain leaking out in sobs that shook my whole body. He hugged me, let me soak his shirt with tears, ran his hand through my hair until my breathing calmed down. "You were so brave," he whispered. "You have no idea how much." "It doesn't feel like I was brave," I replied, my voice hoarse. "It feels like I lost my family." "You didn't lose them. You gave them the chance to really know you. If they don't accept it now, they might still change their minds, but even if they don't, you have a family, you have me, and you have all the people who will love you exactly as you are." It took 3 weeks for my younger brother to call me. 3 weeks of absolute silence, of unanswered messages, of family birthdays I wasn't invited to. When my phone rang and his name popped up on the screen, my first instinct was to ignore it. But something made me pick up. "Hi," his voice came out hesitant. I wanted to talk to you." "About what?" I asked, trying to keep my tone neutral despite my racing heart. "About that day. About what you said." I braced myself for more judgment, more cutting words. But what came was completely different. "I was angry at first," he admitted. "Confused. I thought you were being selfish, thinking only of yourself. But then I started remembering when we were kids, how you always seemed to be carrying some weight I didn't understand. How you never seemed truly happy, even when you pretended. I didn't say anything, just listened. And I realized you were never selfish. You spent your whole life putting all of us first, being the perfect son, the model brother. And when you finally chose your own happiness, we punished you for it." "You didn't punish me," I replied softly. I stayed silent. And silence, when someone you love is hurting, feels exactly like punishment. He paused, and I heard his voice tremble. "I'm so sorry for not standing up for you that day, for letting you leave that house feeling like you were all alone." The tears came back, but this time they were different. Do you accept me?" "I love you," he said simply. "You're my brother. And if this guy makes you happy, then I want to get to know him properly. Not as your roommate, but as the person you love." That call changed something in me, because I realized that courage doesn't guarantee immediate acceptance, but it opens the door for it to happen. My brother didn't fix everything. My parents still weren't talking to me. My mom was still sending messages asking me to reconsider my ways. But there was a crack. A sliver of light telling me not everything was lost. 2 months after that disastrous dinner, we organized a get-together. My brother, his girlfriend, me, and my love. A simple lunch at a restaurant, nothing fancy, but loaded with meaning. "So how long have you two been living together?" my brother's girlfriend asked, genuinely interested. "Almost 2 years," he replied, with that smile that still disarms me. "But we've only really been together for a few months." "Because of the sleep-talking thing?" my brother asked. And when we both nodded, he laughed. "Man, that's wild. Your subconscious completely threw you under the bus." "Totally," he agreed. "But you know, I think a part of me knew I couldn't hide it anymore. Even asleep, even without control, the truth needed to come out somehow." I looked at him in that moment, the way he spoke without shame, the way he held my hand in public, how he didn't flinch when the waiter called us a couple, and I felt a deep gratitude. Because he wasn't just brave for himself, he gave me courage too. "Can I ask you an honest question?" My brother looked at me serious. "How did you know? Like, when did you realize you were like this?" "I always knew," I answered honestly, "since I was a kid, but I spent years trying to convince myself I was wrong. That if I prayed enough, if I tried hard enough, it would go away. But it doesn't go away. Because it's not a disease. It's not a phase. It's who I am." And Mom and Dad, do they know that? They know what they chose to know. That I'm gay. That I'm in a relationship. But I don't know if they understand that this isn't a decision I made yesterday. That it was an internal war for years until I could finally accept myself. My brother nodded slowly. It's gonna take time for them to process, but I'll try to talk to them. I'm not promising anything, but I'll try. That was more than I expected. So much more. Not every coming out story ends with total acceptance. The reality is my parents are still struggling with it. My mom alternates between moments of trying to reach out and messages full of Bible verses about healing and redemption. My dad barely speaks to me. Family gatherings are tense when they happen. But you know what changed? I did. I don't wake up with that weight on my chest anymore, that constant feeling of living a lie. I don't need to monitor every word, every gesture, every look anymore to make sure no one discovers my secret. Because it's not a secret anymore. He's by my side when I wake up. He's at the breakfast table with me. He holds my hand when we walk down the street. And even when someone gives us a dirty look, even when someone makes a mean comment, even when my own family makes me feel unwelcome, I have him, and I have myself. Have you ever regretted it? He asked me one night, lying in bed, my head resting on his chest. Telling your family? Forcing the situation? I thought for a moment before answering. No, because hiding hurts too. Actually, hiding hurts more. Because it's a constant pain that you carry every day, every hour. The pain of rejection. It's intense, but at least it's real. And eventually, it makes room for other things. For lightness. For freedom. You're stronger than you think, he said, kissing the top of my head. We are stronger than we think, I corrected. Because I couldn't have done this alone. You gave me courage. You showed me that being loved exactly as I am isn't an impossible dream. It's real. He cupped my face, making me look into his eyes. Do you remember what I said that night? When you confronted me about what I'd said in my sleep? You said a lot of things that night. I said that I was scared too. That I also spent years hiding. And that when I said your name in my sleep, a part of me was relieved. Because it meant I couldn't pretend anymore. Not sleeping, not awake. My whole body was tired of lying. Tears filled my eyes. I never thought about it that way. The truth has a way of finding the light, he continued. It might take forever. It'll hurt like hell when it comes out. But it will come out. And when it does, you can finally breathe. We stayed in silence for a moment, just existing together in that safe space we built. You know what's funny? I said. Before you, I thought being happy meant being accepted by everyone. That I needed the approval of my family, my friends, the entire society. But now I understand that happiness is accepting yourself first. It's looking in the mirror and recognizing the person reflected back. And when you have that, the acceptance of others becomes less essential. Less essential, but still important, he pondered. Because you still want your brother to call you. Still miss the family gatherings. Still hope your parents will one day look at you without disappointment. It's true, I admitted. But now I can live while I wait. Before, I was on pause, waiting for permission to exist. Now I'm living, for real. 3 months turned into 6. 6 into a year. And slowly, small changes happened. My mother started inviting me for lunches, just the two of us, where she carefully avoided the subject of my relationship, but at least looked me in the eye. My father sent a text on my birthday, just, happy birthday, but it was something. And my brother? My brother became our greatest ally. Took his girlfriend to meet our apartment, invited us to his barbecue. Started casually including us in family conversations, normalizing our existence in a way I didn't even know was possible. My brother and his boyfriend are traveling next month. I heard him say on the phone with someone from the family. Like it was the most natural thing in the world. Like it wasn't a silent revolution. It was at one of those barbecues at his house that something I never expected happened. We were in the backyard, chatting with some of my brother's friends, when one of the friends approached me. Can I ask you a question? She said, a bit hesitant. Sure. How did you find the courage? I have a daughter. She's 15. And I'm almost certain she's going through the same thing you went through. But she doesn't speak. And I don't know how to make her feel safe enough to trust me. My heart ached. Have you tried telling her that no matter what she is, you'll love her just the same? I try. But I think she's afraid. Afraid of disappointing me. Afraid that I'll stop seeing her the same way. I looked at him, across the yard, laughing at some joke my brother had made. I looked at the people around us, living their normal lives, unaware that this conversation was changing something inside me. Tell her that hiding who she is will cost more than any rejection she might face, I replied. Because hiding requires constant energy. Requires you to monitor every word, every gesture, every thought. It's exhausting, and eventually, the truth will come out one way or another. Better that it be on her terms. The woman had tears in her eyes. Thank you. Seriously. Thank you. When she walked away, he came over to me. What were you two talking about? About truths that can no longer stay hidden, I replied, pulling him close. About how even in your sleep, you couldn't lie about what you felt. He smiled in that way that still makes me forget to breathe. Best decision my subconscious ever made. Agreed. And there, in my brother's backyard, surrounded by people who were slowly learning to accept us, I realized something fundamental. The journey of authenticity isn't linear. It has advances and setbacks. It has small victories and painful defeats. There are days when you feel invincible, and days when you want to crawl back into the closet just to not face the stairs. But every day you choose truth instead of a lie, you are building a life that is actually worth living. Today, when I look back at that moment when I heard my name whispered in the dark, I understand that it wasn't just about him revealing his feelings. It was about the universe conspiring so that neither of us could keep pretending. Because some secrets are too big to be kept. Some loves are too intense to be hidden. And some truths are too powerful to remain buried. Even if you try, they find a way to emerge. Whether awake, whether asleep, whether whispered in the dark or shouted in the daylight. The truth always finds its way. And when you stop fighting against it and finally let it out, that's when real life begins. So if you are reading this, or listening, or watching, it doesn't matter, and are carrying your own hidden truth, I want you to know one thing. You are not alone. Thousands of us go through this. Thousands of us face the fear of rejection, the pain of non-acceptance, the crushing weight of living a lie. And yes, being authentic can cost relationships. It can cost comfort. It can cost the version of you that other people expected you to be. But you know what you gain? You gain yourself. You gain the chance to wake up every day and recognize the person in the mirror. You gain relationships based on truth, not performance. You gain the freedom to exist without apologizing. And that is worth every tear, every difficult confrontation, every door that closes. Because eventually, other doors open. Doors that lead to places where you can be completely, authentically, imperfectly you. If you liked this story, if it touched something inside you, if it made you think about your own unspoken truths, I would love to hear about it in the comments. Share your experience. You never know who might need to hear that they aren't alone. And subscribe to the channel for more stories like this. Stories of real people with real struggles, finding courage to live authentically even when the world says it's easier to pretend. Because at the end of the day, living authentically isn't the easiest path, but it is the only path worth taking. See you in the next video.